Welcome to Locations, People, and Events of the Holocaust. Through propaganda, guile, and intimidation, the Nazis gained power, and especially after a communist individual was caught starting a fire to the Reichstag, the Nazis accused communists of attempting a revolution. With Hitler already appointed as Chancellor, they banned the Communist Party, filled the empty seats with their own party members, making them the majority, and proceeded to suspend most civil liberties in Germany. In 1935, the Nazis passed the Nuremberg Laws, which were highly anti-Semitic. And they specifically defined someone as mixed if they had one or two Jewish grandparents, as you can see here. And they were designated as Jews if they had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents, as you can see over here. The law for the protection of German blood and German honor forbade intermarriage between Aryans and non-Aryans to keep the German bloodline pure. And the law of the Reich citizen deprived Jews of citizenship, denying them civil liberties and opening the way for their eventual eradication. The Nazis were masters of propaganda. Led by Joseph Paul Goebbels, one of Hitler's most anti-Semitic and devout followers, the Nazis used written news, radio, and movies to spread their hateful ideology and promote German nationalism. One of Goebbels' most infamous quotes goes as follows: "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent. For the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state." We'll briefly discuss Kristallnacht, a symbol and a sign of things to come. In early November, a Jewish man, upset that his family was being deported, shot and killed a German diplomat. The Nazis used this incident to start a propagandist campaign that would eventually grow into the Holocaust. A pogrom was carried out by the Nazis and non-Jewish citizens. More than 90 Jews were killed in the attacks and more than 30,000 were arrested, with most ending up in concentration camps. Over 1,000 synagogues were burned and over 7,000 Jewish businesses were destroyed or damaged. The name Kristallnacht comes from the shards of broken glass that littered the streets. Hitler and the Nazi Party had already achieved a minor miracle. They had regained virtually all German land taken in the Great War, helped stabilize their economy, initiate the goal of eliminating the Jewish population, and achieved all this with the rest of the world sitting on the sidelines. It would only be a matter of time before Hitler's hunger for more territory would lead the world into a conflict many times greater than the Great War. In World War II, the fascists were clearly intent on world domination, and their political philosophy denied people any true civil rights. And the Nazis especially desired to rid the planet of the racially inferior, which brings us to what they called the final solution to the Jewish problem. And we're talking about the Holocaust, which means destruction by fire. Jews were transported to Eastern Germany and Poland and held in what they called protective custody. Many others were deported to ghettos and camps, and some of the most infamous ones were Dachau and Buchenwald in Germany and Treblinka and Auschwitz in Poland. In addition to the ghettos and camps, the Nazis used Einsatzgruppen, which means mobile killing squads. All told, an estimated 6 million Jews were killed, as well as millions of others who were murdered, including communists, Slavs, Gypsies, and many others who the Nazis considered undesirables. Now to look at a couple main Nazi officials who were responsible for the Holocaust. One was Colonel Adolf Eichmann, who was chosen because of his organizational talents and Nazi ideological devotion. Eichmann was charged with the task of facilitating and managing the logistics of the mass deportation of Jews to ghettos and extermination camps in German-occupied Eastern Europe. The Nazis chose gas as the cheapest and most discreet way to annihilate the Jews and others they saw as racially inferior. The bodies were incinerated in industrial ovens to eradicate the evidence and prevent the spread of disease. Now once again, this is more detail than you need to know, but the Nazis initially used carbon monoxide gas, but Zyklon B was a gas that was used to kill millions of people during the Holocaust as well. And I would be remiss not to mention Heinrich Himmler, a military commander and a leading member of the Nazi Party. He was one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, and one of the persons most directly responsible for the Holocaust. He was the head of the Schutzstaffel, a major paramilitary organization under Adolf Hitler. Himmler oversaw all internal and external police and security forces, including the Gestapo, or the secret state police. Himmler formed the Einsatzgruppen, and as the overseer of the concentration camps, Himmler was arguably the most responsible for the deaths of 11 to 14 million people. Now, this was part of Hitler's master plan to establish a new order. This was the political and economic system which Nazi Germany wanted to impose on Europe, and eventually the rest of the world. Now, the planning of this took place years before the start of World War II. Among other things, it entailed the creation of a German racial state ensuring the supremacy of the so-called Aryan master race. Also, the eradication of the Jews and others considered to be unworthy of life, as well as a massive territorial expansion and the domination of Eastern Europe, with the enslavement of millions of people who were regarded as racially inferior, and to use them as cheap labor. For example, the Soviet Union and Ukraine were to supply Germany with food and raw materials. And when the Germans had no more use of the people, they would kill them off. Hitler planned to establish Berlin as a new world capital called Germania, and as you can see with the scale model, he had big plans ahead of him. The only ones that stood in the way of total Nazi domination of Europe, and perhaps the world, were the armies of the Allies. If they were to fail, the world would fall into a period of darkness perhaps never seen before in history. Now to talk about a couple others who met justice in the end. We will start with the head of the Schutzstaffel and the overseer of the concentration camps, Heinrich Himmler. In May of 1945, he had gone into hiding but was soon captured. During a medical exam, he bit into a cyanide pill and died within 15 minutes. A month earlier, with the Allies pressing in toward Berlin, Hitler was hiding in an underground bunker. In late April, a local magistrate married Hitler and his mistress, Eva Braun. The next day, they bit into vials of cyanide, and then Hitler shot himself in the head. These were fitting ends for two of the worst murderers in the 20th century, and by all accounts, in all of human history. Terrible crimes against humanity were waged in World War II. At the same site where the racist Nuremberg Laws were established, a series of trials were set up for Nazi leaders, soldiers, and sympathizers. In the most famous trial, 23 Nazi leaders were tried for crimes against humanity. Of the charged, 12 were sentenced to death, 8 were sentenced to life, and 3 were acquitted. Now, the most prominent Nazi who was there was Hermann Goering, but before he was hanged, he swallowed a cyanide pill, possibly given to him by a guard, and committed suicide. Nonetheless, the Nazis were declared a criminal organization, and many others were sentenced in subsequent trials.